true. And we didn't prepare for that. And I don't see how you could. As I don't see how the Russian government could have prepared for Beslan. What could you do? What on earth could you do to preempt that, or to imagine that it was possible? And that, I think, is why we're in that situation with Iraq. But it's a situation we know the terrorists have planned and plotted and intend to continue. We know that from the Zawahiri letter to Zarqawi, the unlamented late Mr. Zarqawi, that the intention was to create maximum bloodshed, to kill his own religionists, his co-religionists, and people of his own sect, in order to create maximum horror for the outside world and maximum horror for Iraqis. Sadly, all of the narrative, I hate that word, but it's hard to avoid, all the narrative of Iraq, of course, and I think they know this, they knew this, all the narrative has come down to the deaths in Iraq, of course, are at our hands for going in. I wish that the press in the West, and I wish the governments of the West, had stressed more that the death of people in a suicide bombing is solely down to the person who carried out the suicide bomb and the people who sent him. I wish that could be stressed more. I wish I weren't told constantly that 100,000 people had been killed by us. They hadn't. They weren't. Apart from the fact that figure's fallacious, of course. But they weren't killed by us. It wasn't American bombs that were dropped on civilians. It was Islamist terrorists killing their co-religionists to spite us.
The gentleman at the front.
Thank you. Andrei Piankovsky, visiting Hudson Institute Fellow. As a Russian neoconservative, I follow very closely American political debates here. It's one of the privileges of my fellowship. It seems that one idea is becoming more and more prevailing, that, well, we should address the roots of Islamic terrorism, reach out to Muslims, not alienate them, to fight for their minds and hearts, to consider their legitimate grievances, and so on and so on. And after all the general blah, 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 the only one, the same political recommendation is always suggested. We should address the Palestinian problem. And, well, it seems that this mood is widespread all along the political spectrum, not only among leftists and liberals. And, but it's well known that the only solution of Palestinian problem that would satisfy these Muslims for whose minds and hearts they are trying to fight is the final solution of State of Israel problem. So there's impression that a kind of super Munich is under preparation here, not as a conspiracy, not as a political plan, but as a state of mind. That, well, maybe after we abandon Israel, these people finally live in peace, and so on. Do you share this perception, and what do you think about it?
Yes, no, absolutely right. I mean, I'll just get to it this way. I'll get to it via Afghanistan, as it were. One of the things I always said about that was interesting about this public discussion and public debate before the Afghan conflict was that interesting thing in which people started saying that thing about, well, the CIA, or we made the Taliban, and all that. Again, putting aside at the moment the sort of details of that and the possible factual inaccuracy of it. It was interesting that, because during that period, that sort of month, and between 9/11 and war in Afghanistan, and for the months afterwards, the number of people who talked about that always sort of baffled me, and I always tried to work out why it was quite so irritating. And I realized that it was both morally and sort of historically a sort of acrobatic trick. I mean, if you said that at a dinner party, you could look like you cared about this, and you could also look like you'd been following Afghan politics for the last few decades. And most people didn't. But it had all of the aura of knowledge without any of the actual basis. And a lot of people with the issue of Israel and the Palestinians do the same thing. I mean, some people are wicked about it. Some people are wrong and misguided, I believe, and can be argued out for it or not. But a lot of people just say it because they're lazy. Because if you say the problem is Israel-Palestine, or if we just give this to the Palestinians, that'll be the solution, you can pretend that, you know, that's it, that you know all about it, and that's the only thing. It's very easy. It's simple. If only the world were that simple. But there's also in it, I think, the stalling tactic, the people who say, let's first of all sort out the Israeli-Palestinian issue before we go into Iraq, or let's sort out Israel-Palestine before we go into Afghanistan. I mean, I think, I don't sound too pessimistic about it, but I do think that saying we'll wait till there's peace in Israel-Palestine is like saying we'll wait till the seas run dry. It's saying we'll wait a hell of a long time, at any rate. And so a lot of that has, again, the desire to stop us from acting. I don't buy the anti-Semitic line about a lot of people's objection to Israel. I simply think that ignorance is amazingly prevalent on this question. It is extremely hard, particularly for people of my generation, to understand the ins and outs of the Israeli-Palestinian issue. But if you have been born in the 1970s, let's say, and when you've been growing up, have always seen the issues of suffering Palestinians, whose suffering cannot be denied, the likelihood that you will get on their side, in the same way that you'd get on the side of, say, the starving in Africa or something, as another of your moral hobby horses, is quite large. So in a large number of cases, I don't think it's wickedness that leads people to that particular excuse. I just think it's laziness and not really knowing the facts. It's very interesting speaking to people and saying, when they say we're in the occupied West Bank or something, and you say, well, do you know who occupied it before? Or did that bother you? Would that have bothered you? And so that Israel-Palestine, at the root of it, is one of their biggest lies. The other lie, if I may just touch on it quickly, the one about, you know, we must find out what their grievances are, and poverty and all these things. I would stress, just simply because I always have to stress this, that, I mean, an end must be brought to this idiocy, that you are more likely to become a suicide bomber if you're rich, and you're more likely to become a suicide bomber if you've gone to university, as far as I can see. In Britain, it was, you know, and not to mention Mohammed Atta and co, Omar Sheikh, and all these people. We have a cell on trial at the moment in London from a certain university plotting to blow up nightclubs in London. We've had constant cells, recruitment on campuses. A lot of these people are very rich, they're very privileged, they're well educated, they're not ignorant, they're not living in slums or anything else. If you see the school that Omar Sheikh went to, and then get the person to say this is about poverty. And incidentally, just one last one on that. Incidentally, on that one, there's a very interesting program recently revealing in Britain that revealed the link between Asif Hanif and Omar Sharif, the two suicide bombers who went out from Britain shamefully in 2003 and blew up Mike's place in Tel Aviv. The link between them and Mohammed Sadiq Khan of the 7th of July bombs. The link that was revealed between the two of them, the program managed to get a person who, an Italian peace activist, who had been in the West Bank with Sharif and Hanif before they went and blew themselves up, apparently in the name of the suffering Palestinians. And they went to see some suffering Palestinians in Ramallah. And this Italian aid worker, this Italian peace activist and aid worker, described how he picked up this Palestinian child and just wept. And that Hanif and Sharif were just looking around. They weren't interested at all. He said he thought at the time it was strange that they didn't seem to care. Now, can somebody then please explain why we keep on hearing this thing that they are doing it for their Palestinian brothers? I don't see it.
Next question. I'd like to ask a question which changes the emphasis of the discussion from foreign to domestic questions. I mentioned at the beginning that you were, to some extent, heterodox as a neoconservative, at least in American and Washington's terms. And that's particularly noticeable in your book when you discuss multiculturalism and immigration, which you regard, so to speak, jointly as being very serious challenges to the West and to individual countries in the West. This is something in which there's a huge debate on immigration at the moment in the United States, and I think it's fair to say that most neoconservatives are rather strongly in favour of very liberal immigration policies, including, if you count the president as a neoconservative, including President Bush. I'd like you to sort of explain why it is you take the position you do, and why it is you differ, why you think that, and your comments on, in a sense, the fact that so many of your confreres in this country don't.
Yeah, I mean, I regard the borders issue to be, I always explain that one of the very few sort of absolutely basic things, apart from defence of the nation, that is the responsibility of a government, is the defence of its borders and the protection of its borders. I cannot understand why this government here does not see that as a priority, an absolute priority. We tend to think that countries change by invasion or some vast seismic shift of forces. And the truth is, the 21st century will not happen like that. Countries will be lost bit by bit, and they will change vastly bit by bit. And I'm not talking the Huguenots or anything like this. I'm talking complete societal upheaval. Not just the Hispanicization of America as a possibility, but, for instance, the fact that a recent Dutch government report revealed that, well, at the moment, 2 in 3 children at Amsterdam schools are Muslim. And by 2018, Holland will have a Dutch majority. Now, that isn't a distant prospect. That isn't some thing that we know that we can say, oh, at least I won't live to see that. You will. I hope we all will. And it's the same with America. And my great fear on this one is that the borders issue, which I think some neoconservatives see it as a liberalization issue. I don't, because I see societies that slowly change from societies that are less free. If it happens too fast, as we know, immigration works well when it happens slowly and people integrate. It does not work well when it happens at a great, great speed, which is what's happening with immigration in America and what is happening and has been happening with immigration in Europe. When it happens at a great speed, there is no need to integrate, no need to become part of a society or feel loyalty to a society. And so the nature of that country will vastly change. And I do fear that, that this comes down to the same narrative, which is the narrative of the West. I was thinking, Bruce Bauer, I'm sure you read his recent book, While Europe Slept, a superb book, and one of the things that comes out of reading that again is that the question of our time is, I mean, it was okay for him, 10 years ago, to decide he wanted to go and live in Europe, although to then find out that Europe wasn't the Europe he thought it was. But where will you go next? Where do you flee to next? Where do you find your Western society? It's all very well if you're an Arab. There are plenty of Arab societies. There aren't very many nice Arab societies. There are plenty of countries you could go to. And it's the same for many cases. But in 50 years from now, if the demographics in Europe go the way that people think they are, and if America continues to have such porous borders, can we honestly say that the Western civilization, the Western tradition will still be upheld? I don't think so. And it amazes me to say that, because I mean, I don't want to sound like a gloom monger on this one. But if anyone can seriously explain where the West will be, where it will be practiced, other than, as I say, a kind of one of a set of lifestyle options, then I'd like to know what the positive side of it is. And that's why the border issue is of such importance.
Is there another question? Well, no. In that case, I want to thank Mr. Murray very warmly for a splendid talk, for answering what were extremely difficult questions very fully, and for, in general, presenting us with a somewhat, I won't say gloomy, but a somewhat challenging vision of the future to which we have to respond. I think we are very much in your debt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.